This is Why So Mysterious, the podcast where we attempt to fill the gap between the bodies we have and the lack of knowledge around them.
We're sharing our experiences and answering our own questions,
with some help along the way,
to destigmatize tricky, taboo topics, the
triple
triple T's.
Today our guest is Lex Horwitz, who uses they, them pronouns. They are a queer, non-binary, transmasculine, Jewish human with big femme energy. They work as an LGBTQ plus educator, activist, model, and mental health advocate based in Philadelphia, where they live with their two senior special needs fur babies, Sabu and Ladytooth. Love the name Ladytooth. As a community organizer and educator, Lex produces free educational materials on LGBTQ plus identities, topics, and issues to bring affirming queer knowledge to allies and queer folks alike. Through their advocacy and education, Lex hopes to provide a judgment-free, safe space for all people to engage in critical conversation about gender, sexuality, and community. Welcome, Lex.
Woo!
Thanks for having me.
That was a great intro.
How was it? Well, thank you for writing your lovely intro.
Let's get started. I'm like so excited for this conversation. I think this is like what we've been talking about with the podcast. Like, I think creating that space where people can learn and we can like share information.
But also for us to learn as well, because I feel like sometimes too, like having these conversations, like I've brought this up a lot for me personally, is like I've sometimes felt like too like afraid that I'm gonna hurt someone's feelings or offend someone, so I just don't ask the questions. And I'm really trying to get out of that right now, just regularly. So I'm also really excited, like selfishly for me, to be able to like learn and feel like more.
I think also because a lot of people ask us questions.
They do, yeah.
So it feels really important that we know as much as we can know about like all different experiences, so that when people approach us, because we're kind of like a neutral ground, that it feels like we can then share some information. I think is always just really helpful.
Yeah.
So
with that said,
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, start with, what was your, as a transmasc, non-binary, I don't know what your journey was like as a wee one, with if you kind of knew that you were gonna need to make some changes early on in your childhood, but I wondered what your relationship was like with your body before you started menstruating, and if it changed at all after your first bleed in terms of like where you were at in your body.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I actually did not come to, so that's the term that I use when I talk about coming out. So I understand coming out as like two separate processes. And the one that folks talk about the most and has the most light in the media is the external process of coming out. So the external story or way that you share your internal identities with others. But there's also the most important part of coming out is when you discover yourself for yourself. And that's an internal process that so many people don't talk about.
That's true.
So I call
that's actually so true.
To.
I like that, coming to.
That's
nice.
really interesting.
And also the fact that it's, whether it's coming out or coming to, there's this myth that like there's one day coming out, or there's this one moment where you understand your identity. And that may absolutely be the case for some folks, but I also know that for many folks, it simply just isn't that clear cut.
No.
And so for me, my coming to process was happening from the age of 2-3 years old up until I was in college, where I fully was able to understand my identities in an environment where queer folks were safe, where they were not something to be fearful of or to be scared of being. And I had the environment where the language was not negative and wasn't stigmatized about queer folks and identities that were within the LGBTQ plus community. And so it's always a difficult process for me to talk about my understanding of my body and my identities, my relationship to society, and just like internally understanding what my needs, my body are. Because I've known from a really young age, this coming to, that I didn't fit into this girl category or this female category. But I also was receiving the message every single day, continuously telling me that that was who I was. And I wasn't provided with any window or idea or potential of not being female and a girl. And a big part of that is because I actually went to a all-girls school, and I'm using quotes because very clearly they were
not all girls.
Not a thing anymore.
No.
Yeah. That would be weird.
Yeah.
I grew up in a women's empowerment space, or like a female empowerment space.
Right.
My life.
Oh, wow.
Wow. What, like, was your family and, like, was your all girls school, was it just a private school, or was it like with a religious twist? I'm just wondering, like,
no religious twist.
Okay, good. Because I'm just wondering what, like, you know, was your home, was your family like a space that, like, well, basically, like, did you know any queer people when you were like a wee one? Was there anyone in your family who was like, I don't know, you don't have to do what you don't want to do, if that makes sense?
Yeah, oh my gosh, no, that makes total sense.
Okay.
And so also my school was a private school, was not a religious school, and it was like a college preparatory school. I'm doing DBT right now, dialectical behavioral therapy, like as my therapy with my one-on-one therapist, and I absolutely love it.
What is sorry, what is that?
What is that? Can you
dialectical
behavioral therapy?
Yeah, so dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's a mode of therapy that focuses on two seemingly what would the proper term be? It's two things that seem so opposite, but yet both can be true at the same time. And it's working on understanding and living with those two potentially opposite or conflicting truths.
Oh my God, so many people need that. So many people need that.
It has changed my life. I am so glad that I started doing DBT therapy, and I started by doing CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a talk therapy that most people are used to. And it was extremely helpful for me and the challenges that I was facing. And then when I realized that I was experiencing significant amounts of trauma, and invalidation since coming to my queer and trans identities, that talk therapy, CBT, was really helpful in a lot of ways, simply to be supported and talk about the experiences I was having, but that based on the trauma and how it had just so deeply impacted me, like my mind, my body, just everything about my existence, I was recommended to a trauma-informed therapist to practice T. And so I started doing that work, and one of my favorite things, and I have like Post-it notes everywhere in my bathroom, like on my wall. You can even like see it a little bit like back there. Have different DBT sayings and skills on them. So radical acceptance is one of the biggest parts of DBT, and so it's just accepting things the way they are, no matter how much you want to change them. It's the way that the world works. And one of the other biggest things is the idea of both end. So a lot of times on social media lately, I say that my mantra is always growing, always changing, both end. And so I try to bring a little bit of DBT into the social spaces that I'm in, because it's just such a helpful skill. It's a mindfulness skill of being able to live through the experiences that we're living through and not let them necessarily take us down, but to process through them and to move forward.
I love that. That's a really, I've never heard of that kind of therapy before, and I think that that's very powerful, especially for someone who's, you know, just holding two different truths at the same time and allowing them to both be true. Yeah, it absolutely is.
I think that's pretty much, I would be surprised if there's any person out there that doesn't experience some form of that, because it's like, I would, definitely. I feel like that's extremely powerful.
Very cool.
So I 10 out of 10 recommend. There's a podcast called DBT and Me, two therapists in, I believe, Seattle, Washington, that pretty much just lay it all out there as it's kind of in like a group therapy setting, and just like bring everything that you need.
I love it.
So as I'm doing that, write it.
I'm writing it down right now.
So much. say.
That's awesome.
And that's so I was doing my therapy with my therapist, and I was simultaneously listening to this podcast and just found so much information and so much validation in the fact that, oh my gosh, of course, that these two things that don't seem to make rational sense as coexisting in my mind or as my lived experiences, of course they make sense, because I'm still me, and those are still my experiences. We're still changing, we're still growing. And so working on that level of comfort of bringing it all together with the both and DBT is amazing.
That's amazing. So great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I would assume like that especially like having something like that with everything, like you said, like the trauma that you've been through, would be extremely beneficial. Because I think like what you're doing with social media and everything that you're doing out there is so special, and like you're putting yourself so just like open out there, which I think is so amazing, because I think people, at least from my experience, exposure really almost destigmatizes the things that people hate or, like hate or have negative thoughts against. And so like for me, it's like seeing it out there, seeing people just living their absolute true selves is really, like, in my opinion, how we change the way people think. Like how we can help them change the way that they think.
It's important for a lot of things. There's like, I don't know if you've seen the Fortune Feimsters stand-up, Sweet and Salty on Netflix. Highly recommend. You haven't? Oh my God. You should. It's so
hilarious.
Good. But she said she has a coming out story when she realized that she was gay and just genuinely hadn't considered it until this moment. And then she goes, turns out representation matters. And it's like, yeah. Sure does.
Yeah. It is.
So
representation and visibility is truly everything.
It is.
It is.
Actually, I'm putting an asterisk there. I think it's both and here as well. So I think it's
both
absolutely
representation and visibility.
Yeah.
And like in that same sense, it's not only necessarily seeing, but also like having the language or the communication, whether that's like visual, verbal, mental, emotional, of understanding that, but then also as equally important, and I think always needs to be paired together, is the environment that you're getting that information from, and the environment that you're able to consider that information for yourself. And if that environment is, like we're saying, like having a hatred or animosity or just disgust or shame lens for specific identities, then, well, okay, I've heard the term queer, or I've heard the term gay, or I've heard the term trans, but the environment that it's paired in is showing me that those aren't actual identities that I can consider, because I don't want to die. I don't want to be harassed or discriminated against even more. Is this even something that is an option at all, because of the ways in which the language and the visibility was paired with just such negative lenses of the lack of acceptance, the lack of validity and worthiness and love that my environment, my all-girls school, was portraying. And so, and so that's why it's also, like, DBT has been so helpful in helping me to understand that there isn't a path that every single queer, every single trans person has. In like a similar sense, when we were talking to like coming to your identity or coming out, how it's like simply situationally dependent, but also just this idea that I did receive those messages and I did not have access to queer education or the queer visibility that would have allowed me to fully start to question the truths, I'm putting in quotes, about gender and about sex and about sexuality that were force-fed down my throat every single day, to the point where there were no options available to me, because that was my predetermined destiny based off of the sex I was assigned at birth.
Well, I'm following up on that. I'm curious too, like, you know, when you were growing up in the girls' school and stuff, and the same question of like, was there anyone in your family who made you like just sort of feel safe? But I'm also curious if you had any like role models, whether that be, you know, people in media or celebrities or something like that, who I don't know, made you feel like there were other options? Because that's a question I ask a lot of people, especially people who have like a, you know, quote unquote female experience like growing up, is like there's waves of like very bad role models, I feel like, in media, and then sometimes there's waves of very good role models in media. So I'm curious in your personal life of people who were in your orbit but then like just sort of like visible to the public, if that was a thing for you at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely started to, especially in like my, I want to say senior or like later end of high school, I started to allow myself to feel empowered by being in a female empowerment space, because I was like, well, I'm in this space and I'm told that because of these identities that I was given, am powerful, I am strong, I am intelligent, I can take on the world. And so it was this confusing message of, well, I'm still all of those things and I'm still not a woman and I'm still not female.
Right.
So how do I disconnect the messages of my power, of my intelligence, of my worthiness from the messages I received every single day for 14 years of those things being connected to being a female and to being a woman? And the truth is that I'm still actively working on dismantling and processing and understanding all of the messages and how it resulted in me coming to my identities and coming out and being the authentic person that I am today. And I would say that my mom is the biggest person that like has just been my role model my entire life. And so she was the person who I would have conversations about my body. She was the person that like helped me learn how to use menstruation products, or was so open whenever I had any questions. And she was the person that I was like, that is the strongest, most superhero person in the world, and I want to do everything that I can to be as powerful as she is. And so I don't remember actually having any role models in media necessarily, but knowing that I pulled on and got inspiration from my mom and her position as she fought to be in the medical realm, and she is a gastroenterologist, professor of medicine in a highly male dominated profession. And she is kicking ass. And I always saw her doing her thing, letting anyone walk over her and standing up for everything that she believed in. And so she was the role model that inspired me in everything that I did, and really showed me that I can be the person who I know myself to be, because that's powerful within itself.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is so amazing. I love that so much.
Moms! Amazing. Well, I'm curious too, so what was like, back to menstruation, was menstruation discussed in your home? Was it like a surprise at all? It was not, It was very discussed. It was not a surprise.
My mom. So I should also just say that like my family and I are extremely close. They are the people that I am the closest to. We talk at least once a day, even if it's just in our family group chat that's called Fam Squad in all caps.
Fam Squad. And both your parents are physicians, right? They're both. Okay. That's
so amazing. My dad, he no longer practices medicine, but he is trained in as an orthopedic surgeon, and he currently works within orthopedics in the musculoskeletal area of medicine. But he works from home, which has been amazing because of COVID and all of that. But yeah, my dad is also a physician, and so it's really amazing, and it's such a privilege that the two most common, I guess, ails that I could have possibly experienced growing up were injuries from sports, because sports have always been an integral part of my life, and my father worked in sports medicine.
Right.
And then, oh my goodness, Mom, something's happening to my tummy. What is going on? Like, my mom is like right there to tell me like what's going on. And those are like the two biggest things that I felt like I ever had to deal with. And I had trained medical providers who supported and loved me and lived with me to be able to guide me through those things.
And wanted to talk to you about it too. Like it was knowledge to be shared.
To me about it too.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and the truth is that I remember exactly where I was when I first had my sit-down conversation with my mom about periods. And it's because we openly talked about our bodies and the experiences and changes and puberty and all of those things. And I always actively never wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, we'll talk about it later, Mom. I was like, yeah, like, I'm so glad that you want to talk to me about this thing, but, like, it's not time yet. And would, like, actively be like, okay, I don't necessarily want this information. But I remember when we finally, like, she got me and was like, sit down. We're going to talk about these important things because you need to know them.
Yeah.
And it was the American Girl to know if it was, like, body, puberty, menstruation, something along those lines, like book. And she gave it to me, and I don't remember exactly what happened after that, but I looked at the book and I was like, oh my God, okay, so these are the things that I have to expect. And honestly just felt like in the same sense, okay, I'm opening this book and it's already telling me what my life is and what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to react to it and what my future looks like. So I felt like I was not only being given information about how to, that was the thing. I wish that I could have been given information about how to care for my body without the narrative predetermining my destiny based on being cisgender and being heterosexual.
Yes.
Because the narrative about bleeding, at least in my all-girls school and in the environments that I was in, because there wasn't enough information or open talk about queerness and queer identities and queer relationships and how trans and gender non-conforming, non-binary folks could also experience all of these things. Like we also have bodies. We also have sexuality. We also have gender. And how the narrative just so purposefully erases and ignores and excludes any semblance of queerness or transness when talking about bodies and their relationship to sexuality and sex. And so that's the thing is like I know my mom did her absolute best. I know my mom did everything that she thought she could to support and to love me through that process. And nonetheless, the truth at both ends, and it wasn't what I needed. It wasn't what I wanted. And it actively made me still feel like it actively forced me into a box of how I thought and was told I had to live the rest of my life. And so and my mom, oh my God, my mom was everything. My mom like taught me how to use a tampon. She was the person that was like, this is the aisle we go in, like this is how you know like which products are for you. And I remember my mom taught me how to use a tampon. I taught my sister how to use a tampon. And I know exactly where I was when I taught my sister how to use a tampon. I was like, girl, just put it in there. I was like, if I can do it, you can do it. We're in my mom's bathroom and we're both just like sitting, squatting,
my God,
practicing putting tampons in our bodies. And I was just like, we have to do it. Like, it has to get soaked up, and then we have to take it out.
Oh my God,
we're gonna be fine.
That's amazing, though. Like it's so much of that stuff is done in such like intense secrecy, and I think that that's also where there becomes like a huge disconnect no matter what your relationship is like with your body or what your gender is or what your sexuality is. Is like you're starting off, like a lot of people are starting off that journey with shame and with secrecy, and I think that that carries over so much. And so if you end up having a journey that maybe takes like more work than someone else in terms of like finding out who you are and like how you present and all that stuff, then that's gonna inform you going forward. So I think it's I don't know, I feel like that is it sounds to me like that's a pretty major reason that you are, you know, living the life that you're living now, is like it doesn't have to be a secret and it doesn't have to be shameful. It's okay to talk about it and to let everyone else know too who needs to know. Like
share the information.
You don't have to, you're not alone and you don't have to do it in secret. So
I love that.
Amen to literally all of that, because the truth is that, and also my therapy notebook, I opened it up from a little journal entry from 2019 and it said shame thrives in secrecy. And that's the truth.
It's the truth.
Shame thrives in secrecy. stigma, I guess a negative self-image or self-esteem, like all of these things that can really have such a significant negative impact on us thrive in the secrecy that we feel like they have to be actively living in because of the reactions or because of the narratives in the media that are telling us about those things. And so that's honestly such a big reason why I am so visible and so active in sharing my story and my experiences, are because, well, if I could have had someone or an environment or media that showed me that not only are there trans people, but there are non-binary trans people, and there are genderqueer, or agender, and pangender trans people who exist, and that those identities are valid. And as a gender, a lot of these folks are still dealing with the sex they were assigned at birth in ways to navigate and adapt to their lives, because we also have bodies. How that narrative works with, okay, I was assigned a sex at birth. I don't identify with that sex. Nonetheless, my body is still doing its biological processes of X, Y, and Z. So how do I take care of my body and learn about my body in these ways that aren't thriving in the secrecy and the shame and the stigma of being someone who bleeds, and being someone who bleeds that isn't a woman and who isn't female?
That's actually, that very good segue into my next question, which is, I'm curious, like, you know, we did the first episode of our IGTV series, The Gush, that we did was on, like, not super awesome, like, menstrual hygiene commercials from, like, as long as they've existed, and, like, some of them were just, like, even up to recently, it's just like, what the hell is anyone doing? But as a cisgender heterosexual woman, a lot of this branding offends me. I find it like you know, a box that I don't appreciate being put into.
But you are like, or both of us actually, because we're both cisgendered heterosexual women, like identifying as women, like we are the targets of those commercials. And we are supposed to be the ones that are eating it up and just like, that's me dancing over there in a white dress.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. I love beaches.
I love beaches
on the first
and
day of my
white
period.
bikinis and, you know,
horseback riding.
And it's just like, even just as the target audience, it's offending.
It's offensive.
And I think that, to say, like, if we're offended, like, I can only imagine how upsetting and just isolating,
frustrating
that media is.
Yeah, so I was curious, like, specifically, you know, well, just in general, but also like the marketing of, like, when you see a tampon or a pad commercial, how did that kind of thing make you feel? Like, how did, like, the box of a tampon make you feel, / a commercial or something like that? Like, was there an effect on you being, you know, marketed to that way?
Oh, absolutely. I also, my answer is like multifold, so I'm going to start getting into those parts.
Go for it.
I think that the marketing of like menstruation products, in the same way, so like tampons, pads, in the same way that like the books or the short videos that talk about like how you use a tampon, or like what having your period is in the first place, right? This American Girl book, it all follows the same marketing that assumes that the only people that menstruate are female and identify as female, and that all of these people also identify and are women, and simultaneously that all of these people are feminine. And so these are a whole lot of assumptions that these companies are making about their target audiences without realizing the diversity within the cisgender woman community in the first place, and the diversity of bodies and identities and genders that still need to use those products. And so I definitely feel as if, in the same way that the American Girl book solidified and emphasized and highlighted the narrative that everything is everything is based off of, you are this gender because of this sex, and we're not even going to tell you that gender is different from sex, or that gender identity is different than gender expression, because if you are this, then you have to line up with the following 3 things.
Right.
So if you're assigned female, then you're automatically a woman and you're automatically feminine. So these products are made for you. You can't deny it. And so I felt like that was the message that I was receiving, that, okay, every single place I looked, the only message I was getting was, you are female, you are a woman, you are feminine.
Yes.
And I still knew that none of those things were fully true. And nonetheless, I still needed to use those products.
Yeah.
And so I felt like, in the same sense where I was taking care of my body and doing the things that my body needed, when I knew I had to use those products, I felt like it was actively chipping away at my ability to understand my authentic self, and my ability to question these given truths about identity and about sex and about relationships with others. Because there wasn't another option, there wasn't another visible community or person to relate to. And so I knew I needed to use those products, and I didn't see any other option but to purchase them, and to nonetheless, when I see them, still being forced into that narrative of following everything that is cis het, because that is the only life path that was ever discussed, whether indirectly or directly. And honestly, most of it is very indirect. It's a lot of it is subconscious, a lot of it is indirect messaging that our society doesn't necessarily directly say, like, you have to be this and that, even though that I certainly have gotten those messages as well.
For sure.
But more indirect with, no, you are this, you are assigned female, you are a woman, because these products are only made for women. And it's marketed for women. It's not marketed for people assigned female at birth, or for people who are assigned female at birth with X gender identity and X sex identity to be able to use. And so it just was another thing that continually negative reinforced this predetermined destiny for my life, for my body, for my identities, without my consent. And that's how I understood the products themselves, and especially the way that the products were marketed. And so even though, and another thing that I fully forgot, and I'm not even going to say forgot, I want to say that I fully repressed until this moment, because I remembered it.
Oh, man.
And that's how the brain works. Is that I went to a small liberal arts school, and I studied psychology and gender, sexuality, and women's studies. And while I was there were a lot of physical changes. I take that back. There were not a lot. There was minimal, but nonetheless, a physical change that was happening in the college of bringing more attention to the need for gender inclusive and gender expansive spaces, especially restrooms. And so in our student union on the 2nd floor, there were 2 separate restrooms that were previously a men's restroom and a women's restroom. And they had made the stalls longer with like limited visibility. Why in the hell is that not already a thing that's done?
I literally don't know. I find that so, it is like something I've always thought about, like, who is designing this?
I have no idea. It's just like meant to spy or something like that.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And it's the same thing. It's honestly, restrooms, in the same way that the way that tampons and pads are marketed, are in order to uphold the idea that everyone is cis het, and that those are the only valid identities. And of course, you can't have someone who is assigned female at birth using a restroom with someone who's assigned male at birth. And why are we sexualizing people using restrooms? Or why are we sexualizing specific bodies and specific identities in negative ways in order to push a cis het ideal and narrative?
And also just peddling fear.
It just absolutely peddling fear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so restrooms, in the same way that like the marketing of like pads and tampons say that you are this box, you're gonna fit into this box, and if you don't, we're gonna make sure that you suffer. And that's exactly how all of these experiences have made me feel, because I never fit into those boxes, and I still had to use those products or use those spaces. And so I remember in that specific restroom, I was using one of the gender neutral restrooms, right? So they had like the longer, less visible, more private stalls, and anybody, any sex can can go and use those restrooms. And there was a campaign, I'm trying to remember what it's called. There was a campaign that provided free menstruation products, primarily tampons and pads, to the student body. And I remember they had messaging that was like, these products are for folks who bleed, right? Not just women, not just whoever it may be. Like, these are products for folks who need them. And was very active in saying that not just women menstruate. Folks of all different genders and identities need these products. And these products also need to be free because they are hygiene products that folks need. And so I remember feeling so happy and so grateful that that was a project that was on my campus. And I actively also wasn't menstruating, so I didn't even need the products, but simply seeing that there was support and that there was a more accurate and more inclusive narrative about menstruation that was being upheld and validated meant the world to me. And in a similar sense, it also destroyed my world when those signs were what's the word?
Defaced,
yeah. When someone literally defecated into the products and wrote the most transphobic and homophobic language that they could, correcting the flyer, saying no, only women menstruate. And the lack of a really necessary response, there was a small email sent out, but it didn't fully address the message and the accountability of what was happening on this campus that also claimed to support folks of all genders and all sexes.
Right. That's like,
and keeping it a safe space.
There's a lot of, you know, stuff like that where like institutions are really, really good at talking the talk, but when it's time to like walk the walk, it's not a priority. And the disparity between those two things is, in my opinion, unacceptable. That is a horrible, horrible thing to have happen. I can't imagine, because like obviously like we didn't have something that extreme happening, but like the negative feedback that we got on an ad that was you know, promoting the Charlie, which is the
short, like the boxer, like the male, very like male forward boxer. We got like
violent messages, from like, and like a lot of it was from women, and it was so heartbreaking. Like, it was simultaneously like shocking and heartbreaking, and it was just like such a weird and frustrating combination of emotions, especially when also because it's like, you know, it was an ad for a company that like I work for, but also like this is like, you know, a biological thing that I personally have happen. I'm not non-binary, I'm cis, but to have people come for that so hard, it made me feel unsafe.
And so we had like a hashtag boycott rebel trending.
Because of the ad. Or someone went and started commenting on all our photos on Instagram, Rebel hates women. And it's like,
and I would say like we are far from perfect. Like our company name was Rebel Girl to start with. Like we're not at all perfect, and really like the place where it came from, like when I started the company, it was like me trying to create a space where people felt liberated and felt comfortable with periods, because like there was so much stigma around it. I quickly realized, and you know, like I named it after a song, like Rebel Girl, which I was like, I loved the song. It was everything. It was like
Bikini Kill.
Bikini Kill. Like I loved Bikini Kill, and like it was everything at that time to me. But then I quickly, like, I've always been very accepting of like queer and trans, and I've had a trans friend growing up that I remember like specifically when they were transitioning, like menstruation being like a really heavy topic for them. And so fairly quickly realizing, okay, we need to shift how we are putting our media out there. So like basically from the beginning, we've always used the term menstruator instead of women, because it's just like, absolutely, we were always like, okay, this is a product for everyone. We were still small, so it took us a while to be able to like develop a product that worked really well and was a boxer, because that actually took some time. It was not easy to create. And from my heart, it was like, truly, I just want everybody who menstruates to be able to find a product. Like, that was, it is in my heart, like, it's so simple. Like, if you menstruate, you need to be able to have access to products that work for you. And in that, you also have to be able to feel comfortable in them. And with that, you have to then not feel dysphoria when you're putting it on, because you're putting on a lacy, cute pair of
period panties.
You know? Like, I remember specifically hearing from someone who's not trans, but, you know, saw the underwear and was like, oh, you know, I would never wear these just because they're too femme. Like, they were too feminine. And I was like, valid. Like, that, even just like that, is so valid. We can't just box people into, you know, this one category. And so we've taken, you know, like, it all, this past, like, I guess, like 2 years, to fully just make sure everything about us is 100% inclusive. And, like, that still means that we're going to have to keep doing the work. It's not that we're inclusive right now and we'll, you know, we're not.
And then you're done.
And then we're done, you know, like, so when we put an ad out, and, you know, we've always used the term menstruator. It's never been, that part has always been something that we do. But when we put that ad out, it was insane, the negative feedback that we got.
Because of the word menstruator and other things.
And other things, and just the fact that we were catering to a demographic that needs menstrual products. And a lot of companies in the space that we're in will use, maybe they'll use the term menstruator, but a lot of them won't be so openly accepting of the trans community. And I find that is kind of like the equivalent of the school, you know, creating the space, but then not defending the space. And that to us, like, when we put up that ad, we're like, we're not taking this down. Like, this is what we stand for. Like, you guys can leave. Like, that was like, this is, if this is not for you, it doesn't have to be. Like,
that's fine.
We're not changing. Like, this is what we stand for as a company. And that, I would say, is what frustrates me about the menstrual hygiene industry, is like, when they'll use, like, you'll see their media and they don't say women anywhere, but then
but there's women everywhere.
And they're
Indirect messaging.
the indirect messaging of like, okay, we're gonna be inclusive, and we're gonna follow the trend of inclusivity, but it's not coming from a place of like, no, let's actually break down everything we do, like, throughout the whole structure of the company. There's inclusivity is our top priority. And so it's like, in our media, and even when we get backlash, doesn't matter. It's not going to change how we approach the situation. Like, this is just who we are. If you don't like it, you don't need to buy it.
No, and you can also just look away. Like, you don't have to be here. It's fine. So.
And I also, I'm trying to think of like the way to say this. So like, for when I've done my posts where I'm wearing my Rebel undies and talking about menstruating as someone who is not a woman, who does not identify as female, I sometimes also get messages, and one specific message that, or comment on my posts, and one message that I'm currently thinking of really just kind of encompasses it all, and it was a woman who commented on my post saying, "Only real women bleed." And so I'm thinking about the concept of, what is a real woman?
What the fuck even is that?
What is a real man? Because I can tear that shit apart in a millisecond for
very
you,
quickly.
And then your comment doesn't make sense.
No.
Because also, oh God, there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much, for lack of a better word, I want to say lack of education, borderline ignorance that fuels hate.
Yeah.
And that so many of these comments are coming from that fearful place. But the fear is not justified or valid in any way, shape, or form.
No.
And so it comes from all of the indirect messages that people are getting throughout their entire lives about who these products are for, why these products are needed for those specific people, and how they have purposely erased or ignored or excluded specific communities. And so it's honestly, what is a real woman? What does it mean to be someone who menstruates? Like, what does any of that have to do with, right, as like gender identity, have to do with the sex you're assigned at birth, or the body that you have and the processes that it goes through?
Yeah.
The truth is that there's nothing inherently connecting any of those things together.
No.
But the thing that people are misunderstanding is that, yes, the majority of the population is cisgender, and not everyone is cisgender, and therefore there are going to be people who need these products who are not women.
Yeah.
You may not be one of them. I didn't ask you. I don't care. I'm still here, and I need these products.
Yeah.
But I don't remember asking you what you mean by a real woman. I know what a real woman is, and unfortunately it's also not you, because real women don't hurt other people.
Yeah.
No, they don't tear people down like that. It's just not the case. And also, just like, I know a lot of, again, cisgendered, heterosexual women who want to have, you know, families, who haven't had a period in years, like have very inconsistent periods or something like that. It's just like, that is just the dumb, anyway.
I know. It literally, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And
and that's
you
insulting to
that,
them also.
Exactly. Like, you are then putting women in a box that, are you not a woman once you're menopause? Like, once you're in menopause, like,
are you
do you know
no
what I mean?
longer?
Like, you're no longer a woman at that stage. You know, if you hold that identity so firmly that like you know, like, that this is what a woman to that person is, what are you post-menopause then? Like, do you just lose your identity at that point? So it is just negative, I think.
Like, are you a less valid woman because you no longer
bleed? No, like, not at all. And so it's I think it's just detrimental to anybody to be saying that, like, real women.
Yeah.
You know.
It doesn't, it's not helping anybody to say things like that.
No.
So.
It's upholding the Western ideals that you must be cisgender, you must be heterosexual, and these are the things that looks like, and if you aren't, then you are wrong, or you are this thing that is going to be discriminated against or stigmatized, when we don't need to be reinforcing these detrimental and false dichotomies and narratives that are in our marketing, that are in our products, that are in our simple just relationships with people, whether it's online or in real life. And so I know, because there is such a just like fervent reaction to the idea of menstruating not being exclusively for women. In the same way that any conversation that I have had with people about raising children has just been the blaze from hell. Like, there's something about the topic of raising children and about menstruation that, if it doesn't follow the socially constructed, recently socially constructed ideas about what is ideal for women, what's ideal for men, because those things are constantly changing. But if it doesn't reinforce that, then it's going to destabilize every single person. And everything that you know about the world. Absolutely not. But people carry that fear and that lack of information and just ignorance with them into these spaces without realizing that it really doesn't impact you, boo. Like, take a seat.
I always find that I find that like people I find that people often like find that like liberation of, you know, people, like, especially when it comes to menstruators, it's like people that haven't been the target market of a campaign. It's like the liberation of including them in the conversation. It doesn't take away from your existence if
No.
you are a cisgendered woman.
Absolutely
it does
not.
not take anything away from you. And especially like what we responded to a lot of people was we still have a ton of very feminine styles on
That's what you're
that we
after.
offer. Like we're not taking those away and replacing them with male boxers. We are simply adding male boxers to our line of
And I would
products.
say masculine boxers.
Sorry,
That's the term
masculine.
that I
Yes.
prefer to
They're
use.
definitely,
You are, yeah, you are correct. Yeah, masculine boxers, but even then, it's like there's nothing being taken away from you. It is still 100%. You actually have 3 more options than you know what I mean. Like there is. Sadly,
It's
I've
also available for your use.
yeah. I'm like there's nothing being taken away from you when we add
And also,
something for
like,
someone else.
Can we not just like, as you know, like, you know, obviously there's still like a lot of discrimination and you know, things that cis women face too, but can we not all be on the same team? Can you not let these people who are having this experience also like back you up? Can we not all lift each other up? And I think that we absolutely can.
Yeah.
And if you lead with that, a lot of things are going to get easier for you if you don't assume everyone is your enemy.
Yeah, allyship. Like
Allyship. Can we not all be
can we
allies
not
for each other?
support each other? Yeah, exactly. Like it is really like whenever there, I would say for us, it's like we're creating an inclusive space, but we are also calling on all cisgendered females to come and support that space because
Come with us.
come with us because we also want them. And the thing is like our space is supportive to anyone that menstruates. So sometimes we do feminine stuff. Sometimes we do more masculine things. Like it really doesn't, it's for everyone.
Yeah. You just
So.
try to balance
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
everybody
And
gets a
that
turn.
is one of my favorite things about Rebel, and even just like the website and the size chart and the language. Is like everything about it is so intentional in being, I don't know if the right term is gender free, honestly, because there isn't mention of specific genders, so it is gender free.
Yeah.
And the size guide is based off of measurements, not predetermined ideas of what men's and what women's clothes
Yeah.
need to
No.
look like.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, and so even just being a company that, I'm going to re-say that, it shows that there's truly no reason, and I've been advocating this for years, there's truly no reason for any form of clothing or product brand to use gender or to use gender messages in their products. Because so many of the messages we're getting recently, or like, I guess recently is a fine word to use, but okay, so you're telling me that these products are for people who menstruate. If I'm looking at a tampon commercial, you're not saying women in your commercial, but every single person I'm seeing is a woman. Okay, great. Now, if you show a more diverse range of bodies, identities, and sexes, and still show the products being used by all of these people, and you're not directly talking about gender still, what are you changing? You're actually becoming a product that more people can use in an affirming and safe way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so there's just, I mean, I truly believe that just as the way that tampons and other products are marketed, whether it's the pink or the feminine aspect,
Yeah.
in the same way that the American Girl book really upheld, and these two things uphold like cis het ideals. So many clothing brands, every single one of them, besides for a few that are fully gender free and inclusive,
Yeah.
they still pull on those ideals, and that means they still are upholding this idea that if you're a woman, you need to fit in this woman's chart, or if you're a man, you need to fit in this men's chart. Okay, well, what are the common things here? Measurements.
Measurements.
Oh my God.
It's so true.
Yes, some women bleed, and other people who are not women bleed.
Yeah.
We'll just call people like menstruators. Like that is as simple as it is. There is truly no reason to need to insert gender into a product or into a community or into any concept.
Yeah.
When we have the language to make it inclusive and affirming and accepting for everyone without excluding anyone. Like
Yeah,
you're saying.
absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you might not even notice that we took it away if you weren't looking for it before. So, yeah. But I think that is a really fabulous way to wrap up.
Yeah. I think this has been
Can I say one more thing?
Of course, yes.
But also, I also love that there is like this range of like masculine and feminine and androgynous products, because just because I'm non-binary doesn't mean that I automatically want to have the boxer.
No, exactly.
Like, I may be a diehard Cheetah Girls fan and I want to have that cheetah print on my booty.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's nothing about my gender identity being a non-binary person that is mutually exclusive of me liking and wanting feminine things or wanting liking masculine things or androgynous things.
Yes.
And so exactly like you said, there are going to be cisgender women who are just not about the frilly or more like traditionally feminine underwear and would prefer to have boxers for whatever their valid reasons are, in the same way that maybe my desire for my underwear is more androgynous one day and maybe I'm feeling real femme or real masc another day. My gender identity is still the same, but the ways that I choose to express my gender through my underwear, through my clothes or whatever it may be can change, and that's equally valid, and you don't have to be trans for that.
You don't.
It's up to you.
I think that's like any person from day to day. You might feel like I'm wearing a skirt today, but I'll be wearing trousers tomorrow. Like my identity like doesn't change from day to day. It's just how I'm feeling that day. Like, and I always think of like our product line as like almost like a scale. Like you could be anywhere along that scale and you should be able to find a product. Like it's not one end of the spectrum or like either ends of the spectrum. It is really like anywhere. Because there's also like a ton of what I would say like cisgendered females that love the boxer because it's just so goddamn comfortable.
It's comfortable,
and it's like, and I'm like, I love the boxer. We're like, it's for everyone. You know, so it's. I always think of our product line as like a spectrum. Like you can just whatever you like, you'll find it, you know.
It's your choice, but also like wherever you kind of like land, because we're all changing all the time. Our styles change, how we're feeling, what we're going through, and I feel like it's the same kind of thing. It's just like wherever you're at, you should still be able to like find something that's going to make you feel all right and not compromised in a way. And I'm definitely proud of us for doing that and actively trying to make changes to keep doing that well. I think that's, So thank you for noticing.
Thanks.
And y'all are perfectly fitting my mantra of always growing, always changing. Because like everything in life, we adapt and we grow and we learn from the experiences that we have, and we just keep going.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
That's one of my favorite things about y'all.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to tell the people where they can find you, because I think everybody needs to hop on your train. And also just because you're such a good educator as well. And I think that's also why it's really important. So tell the people.
Yes, oh my gosh, well thank you, I am fully blushing. So you guys can find me, or y'all can find me on social media. So my Instagram and my TikTok and Twitter are at Lex_Horwitz. And that's spelled LEX_HORWITZ. And my YouTube and my Patreon pages are under Lex Horwitz. And my website, which has a bunch of free educational resources, as well as other information about myself and interviews and places to find amazing small businesses such as yourself, are on my website. So that is www.lexhorwitz.com. Everything I've decided to make my name, apparently, because it's the easiest to remember.
That's perfect. I love it.
Amazing. That is easy to remember. Well, Lex, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and we could talk to you forever.
Literally forever.
Good luck with your move. We're so excited for you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for asking me to be part of this conversation. I'm always here and always willing to engage in this form of education, this form of activism and visibility. And so thank you for being a brand that genuinely cares and creates space and is working on all of the ways in which to support the community that are not in explicitly gender or sex ways.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Why So Mysterious is hosted by Sara Jonsdottir and Raven McLean. Audio is produced and edited by Sonia Inke. Original music is by Malcolm Holt and Alexis Young.
Check out our website, whysomysterious.com, for more information about this episode and other episodes. You can also email us with questions or topics you'd like to hear us cover on the show at whysomysteriousPod@gmail.com.
Follow us on Instagram at Why So Mysterious Pod for updates, fun facts, and general outrage. If you're an audio listener, but you'd rather be a voyeur, check us out on YouTube.
If you like the show, tell your friends, and don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Until next time!